The glass wall of the private rehab wing shook as someone slammed a fist against it. Inside, alarms blinked red. Not the loud kind that meant machines were failing, but the quiet kind that meant rules were being broken. 2 security guards stood frozen in the doorway, unsure who to obey. A little girl in a wheelchair clutched the armrest so hard her knuckles turned pale, her eyes wide, her breath thin and fast. And right beside her, barefoot on the polished floor, a skinny beggar boy lifted his hands, not to fight, not to beg, just to shield her, like his body was the only door left between her and the world. "You don't touch her," the boy said, voice low, steady. "Not again." The billionaire behind the guards took 1 step forward, then stopped so suddenly it looked like time grabbed him by the collar. Because the boy's voice wasn't unfamiliar. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, like he had said them before years ago, in a place no one else was supposed to remember. And then the boy turned his head, just enough for the overhead light to catch his face. The billionaire's breath left him like it had been stolen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. A woman's voice snapped through the chaos, sharp with authority and fear. "Mr. Hart, tell them to take him away." The billionaire didn't answer. He stared at the boy as if he was looking at a ghost that had finally decided to speak. And the question landed in the room like a dropped stone. How could a beggar boy possibly know what the Harts had buried for years? 2 days earlier, the city still looked normal. Traffic still snarled at the same intersections. Coffee still steamed in the same glass cafes. People still hurried past each other, chasing meetings, chasing money, chasing time. But for Elliot Hart, nothing was normal anymore. Not since his daughter stopped walking. Not since the world became a schedule of specialists and scans, of careful ramps and silent stairs, of people pretending not to pity them. Elliot Hart owned towers of glass and steel, the kind that put his name on the skyline. He was one of those men the news called self-made. As if grit alone could build a life, as if luck had never knocked on his door. He ran Hartwell Systems, a company that started with medical tech and expanded into everything that promised solutions. Software for hospitals, robotics for warehouses, devices for homes that made people feel safe. He was famous for fixing problems. But the one problem he couldn't fix was his 10-year-old daughter, Ivy. Ivy had been bright in a way that made adults talk softer around her, like she might overhear their smallness. She loved puzzles, not because she liked winning, but because she liked seeing the hidden shape. She loved birds, especially the ones that perched on ledges too narrow for anyone to understand how they balanced. And she loved running, not the kind of running people did on treadmills while staring at screens. Real running, barefoot on warm grass, sneakers slapping pavement, racing her father down a hallway just to see him pretend he couldn't catch her. Until the accident. They never called it the accident in front of her, but that's what everyone else called it. A crash on a rainy afternoon. A driver who swore they didn't see the stoplight. A car spinning just enough to hit the one place it shouldn't have. Elliot had been at the wheel. He had survived with bruises, a cut on his forehead, and a bruise on his conscience that never faded. Ivy had survived too, but her spine had taken the damage. Not a clean break that doctors could point to like a simple problem. It was complicated, nerves swelling, pain that refused to map itself neatly. The doctor spoke in careful language that sounded hopeful and empty at the same time. Rehab, time, patience, technology. Elliot bought all the technology. He imported specialists. He built a private therapy wing inside the best hospital in the city. And still, Ivy's legs remained quiet, like they were waiting for someone to remember how to listen. Elliot's fear wasn't just that Ivy might never walk again. It was that she would look at him one day and realize he couldn't fix this, that she would stop believing in him, that she would stop believing in herself. His wife, Nadia, carried her own fear, quieter but sharper. Nadia Hart wasn't born into this world of penthouses and boardrooms. She had grown up with a single mother who worked double shifts and still managed to smile. Nadia's strength wasn't loud. It was steady. She was the one who learned the names of every nurse, the one who noticed when Ivy's shoulders tightened before a painful exercise, the one who made hospital rooms feel less like cages. But even Nadia had started to crack in small ways. Elliot saw it in how she stared too long at Ivy's and used sneakers, and how she flinched when someone said, "She's so brave," like bravery was something you needed when you were being robbed. And Elliot saw the pressure closing in from all sides. The company, the board, the headlines. Hartwell Systems had investors who didn't care about a little girl's legs. They cared about stock prices. They cared about appearances. They cared about the idea of Elliot Hart as an unstoppable machine. His CFO, Grant Vail, reminded him of that every day. Grant Vail was polished in a way that made him look expensive even when he was alone. Every suit fit perfectly. Every smile looked practiced. Grant had been with Elliot for years, long enough to speak as if the company was his too. He was always calm, always reasonable, and that was what made him dangerous. "Take care of your family, Elliot," Grant would say, voice warm as honey. "We'll handle the noise." But Elliot had started to notice the noise wasn't handled. It was shaped. A rumor here, a leak concern there, a headline that suggested Elliot was distracted, a whisper that maybe the board needed stability. Stability sounded like a word you used before you replace someone. Open loop number 1 had been planted without Elliot wanting it. Someone close to him was pushing. Someone was watching. And Elliot couldn't tell if the danger was coming from the outside world or from inside his own walls. That morning, Nadia insisted they go out of the penthouse and into the public wing of the hospital. Not for attention, for air, for something that felt less controlled. "We can't live like we're hiding," she told Elliot as she adjusted Ivy's scarf. "She needs to see the world still exists." Elliot wanted to argue. He wanted to wrap Ivy in a bubble of money and security. But Ivy looked up at him, eyes steady, and said, "Dad, I'm not made of glass." So they went. The hospital lobby smelled like disinfectant and coffee. People moved in slow rivers, pushing wheelchairs, carrying flowers, holding paperwork like it was a life raft. Elliot kept his hand on Ivy's chair as they rolled toward the rehab wing. Nadia walked beside them, holding Ivy's favorite book, the one she reread because she liked knowing what came next. And then, near the entrance, they saw him. He was just a boy at first glance. Thin, barefoot, hair too long, like no one had trimmed it in months. He stood near a pillar, not in the way of anyone, but close enough to be seen. Most people looked away. Some glanced and then sped up, guilty about their own speed. A security guard watched him with bored irritation, like the boy was a stain on the hospital's clean image. The boy's eyes, though, were the opposite of bored. They were alert. As Nadia passed, the boy stepped forward. Elliot's body tensed automatically, not because he feared a child, but because the world had taught him that anything unexpected near Ivy was a threat. The boy didn't reach for money. He didn't plead. He looked straight at Nadia and said, clear as a bell, "Ma, I can make your daughter walk again." Nadia stopped so fast her shoes squeaked. Ivy's fingers tightened on her blanket. Elliot's first instinct was anger, sharp and protective. It felt cruel, to promise a mother something the world had already taken. It felt like a scam. It felt like someone playing with their pain. Grant Vail's voice echoed in Elliot's head, the voice he used when he wanted to appear kind. "People will always try to take advantage of you when you're vulnerable." Elliot stepped in front of the wheelchair slightly, not blocking Ivy's view, but claiming space. "What did you say?" Elliot asked. The boy's gaze flicked to Elliot, and Elliot felt it, like a cold hand on the back of his neck, because the boy's eyes didn't look at him, like most strangers did. Most people recognized Elliot Hart and reacted in one of 3 ways. They either lit up, excited to be near a billionaire. They looked nervous, afraid of saying the wrong thing. Or they pretended not to recognize him while still studying him. This boy did none of that. He looked at Elliot as if Elliot was just a man, and as if the boy had known him longer than a man should be known. "I said I can help her," the boy repeated, nodding toward Ivy. "If you let me." His voice wasn't desperate. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't trying to sound big. It sounded certain. Nadia's face shifted through emotions too fast to name. Hope tried to rise, got slapped down by caution, then tried again. Elliot heard himself say, "Get away from my family." The boy didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket, slow enough not to seem threatening, and pulled out something small. Not money, not a weapon, a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. He held it out toward Nadia. "Read it," he said. "Not here. Later. You'll understand." Nadia didn't take it. Elliot's hand came up, palm outward, warning. But Ivy, quiet up to now, leaned forward slightly and stared at the paper like it was a puzzle piece. "What is it?" Ivy asked. The boy's eyes softened. "A promise," he said. Nadia swallowed. The security guard shifted, watching. Elliot's jaw tightened. He didn't want this. He didn't want some street kid planting ideas in Ivy's mind. He didn't want another hope that would crash and leave them with more broken pieces. "Go," Elliot said again, firmer. "Now." The boy's gaze stayed on Ivy. "Your left ankle," he said, voice calm. "It hurts most when they bend it inward, and you pretend it doesn't because you don't want your mom to cry again." Nadia's hand flew to her mouth. Elliot's grip on the wheelchair tightened, so hard his knuckles whitened, because Ivy's ankle pain was real, and it wasn't written on any report anyone outside the rehab team would see. They had kept it private. They didn't even say it out loud in the lobby. Ivy's eyes widened, not with fear, but with the shock of being seen. "How do you know that?" Elliot demanded. The boy's answer was the first real mystery. He didn't explain. He just said, "Because I listen." Then he stepped back toward the pillar, as if he had said what he came to say, as if the ball was in their court. Elliot felt Nadia's hand touch his arm. "Elliot," she whispered, like she was afraid of her own voice. "No." Elliot snapped, a little too loud. Heads turned. He hated the feeling of being watched. He hated the feeling of being open. The boy looked at Elliot one last time, and his lips moved as if he almost said something else. Something personal. Something dangerous. But instead he just said, 2 days. That's all I'm asking." Then he turned away, melting into the flow of people like he was just another shadow in the hospital's busy life. Nadia stood there, frozen. Ivy stared after him. Elliot's heart hammered, not from fear of a child, but from the way that child had spoken into their private world like he had a key. Open loop number 2 tightened like a knot. Why did the boy know things he shouldn't? And why had Elliot felt, for one impossible second, like he was looking at something he had lost? They went through rehab as planned. The therapists did what they always did. Gentle encouragement, careful movements, reassurances that sounded rehearsed. Ivy worked hard, as she always did. She smiled for Nadia. She joked with the therapists. But Elliot watched her eyes. He watched the little flickers of pain she hid. He watched the way her shoulders drooped when she thought no one was looking. When the session ended, Ivy was tired. Nadia wheeled her toward the elevator. Elliot hung back for half a second, scanning the lobby. The boy was gone. But Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there somehow. Watching. Listening. That night, the penthouse felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that made your thoughts loud. Ivy fell asleep early, exhaustion pulling her under. Nadia stood by the window, staring at the city's lights. Elliot poured himself a glass of water and didn't drink it. They didn't talk at first, because talking meant admitting how much that boy had shaken them. Finally, Nadia said, "He knew about her ankle." Elliot's voice came out rough. He guessed. Nadia turned, eyes sharp. "No." Elliot, he didn't guess. He knew. Elliot hated that she was right. He paced, anger trying to cover fear like a blanket. "He's a scammer," Elliot said. "Or someone sent him." Nadia's eyebrows tightened. "Sent him." Elliot thought of Grant Vale. He thought of the board. He thought of the way people in his world used anything as leverage. "Maybe it's a setup," Elliot said. "A story. A headline. Desperate billionaire falls for Beggar's miracle cure." Nadia crossed her arms. "Or maybe he's just a kid." Elliot stopped pacing. "Kids don't know private medical details," he snapped. Nadia's voice softened. "Then how did he?" Silence sat between them. It was Ivy who broke it later, in her small voice from the couch, half asleep, but listening. "Dad," she said. "He didn't look at me like I was broken." Elliot's throat tightened. Ivy blinked slowly, fighting sleep. He looked at me like my legs were just sleeping. Nadia's eyes shone. Elliot turned away so they wouldn't see how much that hurt, because Ivy's innocence made the world's cruelty stand out sharper. Elliot wanted to protect her from false hope, but he also wanted, more than he admitted, to believe in something impossible. The next morning, Elliot told his head of security to double their watch. No one gets near Ivy without clearance. No strangers. No surprises. He didn't mention the boy by name because he didn't have one, but his mind kept replaying the boy's face. Those eyes. That voice. The way his posture changed when he looked at Elliot, as if he was measuring him against some memory. Elliot went to work for the first time in days because Grant had insisted it was urgent. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and expensive cologne. Grant Vale stood near the screen, clicking through slides about quarterly performance, about investor confidence, about the need for public stability. Elliot barely heard it. His mind drifted back to the hospital lobby. Grant's voice cut through. "Elliot, you're with us?" Elliot blinked. Grant smiled warmly, like a friend. "I know it's hard, but the company can't run on sympathy. People are watching." There it was again. People are watching. Elliot sat back, eyes narrowing slightly. Watching or waiting. After the meeting, Grant walked with Elliot down the hallway. "By the way," Grant said casually, "I heard you were in the public wing yesterday." Elliot stopped. "How did you hear that?" he asked. Grant chuckled lightly. "Come on. You're Elliot Hart. People notice." Elliot stared at him. Grant's smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened just enough to be seen. "Be careful," Grant added, voice low. "The public loves a story, and stories don't always care about truth." Elliot walked away with a cold weight in his chest. Open loop number 1 tightened again. Someone close to him was paying attention. Maybe too much. That afternoon, Nadia returned to the hospital with Ivy for another session. Elliot couldn't go. Meetings, obligations, the cage of responsibility. But he had instructed security to escort them. 2 guards. Close but discreet. Nadia tried to ignore their presence, but she felt it like a shadow. Ivy, though, seemed oddly hopeful, as if she expected to see the boy again. When they reached the lobby, Ivy scanned the pillars. The boy wasn't there. Nadia felt a strange disappointment she didn't want to admit. They went through therapy. Ivy pushed harder than usual. She insisted on one more attempt at standing with the bars. Her hands trembled with effort. Her face reddened. The therapist praised her. Nadia clapped softly, tears threatening. But then Ivy's ankle twisted slightly. She gasped and collapsed back into the chair. Her eyes filled with frustration. "I hate this," she whispered. Nadia knelt beside her. "I know." Ivy's voice cracked. "What if this is forever?" Nadia swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then we'll build a forever that still feels like yours." Ivy looked at her mom. "But I want to run." Nadia hugged her, holding tight. And in that moment, Nadia heard a voice behind her. "Soft. Close. Not like that," the voice said. Nadia turned. The boy stood a few feet away, as if he had always been there. Security stiffened, hands moving subtly. But the boy lifted his hands again, palms open. "I didn't touch her," he said quickly. "I just saw." Nadia's heart jumped. "How did you get in here?" one guard demanded. The boy's eyes flicked to the guard's badge. "Because you didn't lock the side entrance after lunch," he replied, calm. "You were on your phone." The guard flushed, angry. Nadia's mind spun. This boy noticed everything. The boy stepped closer, not to Nadia, but to Ivy's wheelchair. He crouched slightly, level with Ivy's eyes. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her ankle. Ivy hesitated. Nadia's protective instinct screamed no, but Ivy looked at Nadia like she was asking permission to hope. Nadia's fingers trembled. She forced her voice to be firm. "You can't touch her." The boy nodded. "I don't need to." He leaned closer and spoke softly, like he was sharing a secret. "When you try to stand, you lock your shoulders," he told Ivy. "You hold your breath. Your body thinks it's in danger." Ivy blinked rapidly. "It is in danger." The boy shook his head. Not danger like that. Danger like embarrassment. Like disappointment. Ivy's eyes dropped. He continued, voice gentle. Your legs aren't the only part that needs waking up. Your brain still thinks falling is death. Nadia's breath caught, because it sounded true. Ivy whispered, I'm scared. The boy nodded, as if that was the most normal thing in the world. Then we start with something smaller, he said. We teach your body it can be safe again. The therapist, watching from a distance, frowned. Who are you? The boy looked up. No one, he said simply. But I know how to help. The guard moved forward. That's enough. You need to leave. The boy stood slowly, eyes still on Ivy. I'm not here for money, he said to Nadia. I'm here because I saw her face. And because I promised someone I would try. Promised who? Nadia asked before she could stop herself. The boy's jaw tightened, like he had said too much already. He glanced toward the elevator, as if expecting someone to appear. Then he reached into his pocket again and pulled out the folded paper. He held it out. Nadia stared at it. Her hand rose slowly, almost against her will. She took it. It felt warm, like it had been held close to a body for a long time. The boy took a step back. 2 days, he repeated. Let me show you one thing. If it doesn't help, I disappear. You never see me again. The guard grabbed the boy's arm. The boy didn't fight, but his eyes flashed. Be gentle, he said quietly. I bruise easy. The guard hesitated, oddly affected by the words, then tightened his grip anyway. As they pulled the boy away, Ivy called out, Wait! Everyone stopped. Ivy looked at the boy, cheeks wet. What's your name? She asked. The boy paused. For a second, it looked like he was deciding whether the truth would hurt. Then he said, Caleb. And he let the guard lead him away. Nadia stared at the paper in her hand, like it might burn. Back in the penthouse that evening, Nadia opened the folded page. It wasn't a letter written neatly. It was messy, like someone had written it in a hurry. The handwriting was uneven but determined. Nadia read it once, then again. Then she sat down hard on the couch, one hand covering her mouth. Elliot came in from the office, loosening his tie. He saw Nadia's face and froze. What happened? He asked. Nadia held out the paper with trembling fingers. Elliot took it. His eyes moved across the lines. And as he read, the color drained from his face. Because the letter wasn't from the boy. It was from a woman Elliot hadn't thought about in years. A name he had trained himself not to say out loud. A name buried in the past like a sealed box. The letter said, Elliot, if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time. I tried to tell you before. They wouldn't let me near you. They said you'd ruin everything if you knew. But you deserve to know the truth. The boy you saw today isn't a stranger. He's yours. Elliot's hands began to shake. Nadia's voice was barely a whisper. Elliot, what is this? Elliot's throat worked like he was swallowing glass. No, he said, but it wasn't denial, it was disbelief. No, that can't be. He read the next line, eyes widening. They told you your baby died. They lied. They took him. They said it was to protect the company, to protect your reputation, to protect the deal you were about to sign. I didn't understand then. I understand now. I'm sorry. His name is Caleb. He's been on the streets since I couldn't keep him safe anymore. Please don't let them take him again. Elliot's mind flashed back, years ago, a hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, the sound of Nadia crying, the doctor's serious face. No, not Nadia. Someone else. A different time. A different life. A newborn he had held for a moment and then lost. A child he had mourned in silence, because mourning publicly would have made headlines. Elliot's knees weakened. He sat down, staring at the paper like it was a weapon. Nadia sat beside him, eyes wide. Elliot, she said, voice shaking. What baby? Elliot couldn't breathe. He had never told Nadia the whole story. He had never told anyone, because he had believed it was finished, because he had believed it was pain with no solution, because he had believed the past was buried. Now the past had walked into a hospital lobby barefoot and looked him in the eye. Nadia's hand gripped Elliot's arm. Elliot, talk to me. Elliot's voice came out hoarse. Before I met you, before the company became what it is, there was someone. A woman named Miriam. Nadia's face tightened. Not with jealousy. With shock. Elliot continued, staring at nothing. She worked at one of our early clinics. We were young. I was reckless. But I cared about her. He swallowed hard. She got pregnant, he whispered. And then there was a complication. They told me the baby didn't make it. Nadia's eyes filled. Elliot's voice cracked. I believed them. I mourned. I signed paperwork. I let it go because everyone said letting it go was the only way to survive. Nadia looked down at the letter. Who is they? She asked, voice sharp now. Elliot's jaw clenched. He didn't want to say the name, because saying it would make it real. But her face rose in his mind. A younger Grant Vale, standing in a hallway, speaking softly about damage control and public perception. Elliot's fists tightened. Grant, he whispered. Nadia's head snapped up. Grant Vale. Elliot nodded, eyes dark. He was already there back then. Not CFO yet, but close. Nadia's mouth trembled. Are you telling me your CFO might have? Elliot stood suddenly, pacing again, like he needed movement to keep from breaking. I don't know, he said quickly. I don't know what this is. It could be a trick. Nadia held up the letter. This is in her handwriting. Elliot stared at it. He remembered Miriam's handwriting, quick, slanted, like she was always running out of time. It looks like it, he whispered. Nadia's voice became steady, the way it did when she stepped into crisis. Then we find him, she said. We talk to him. We confirm the truth. Elliot stopped pacing. And what about Ivy? He asked, fear sharp. What if this is connected to her? What if bringing him in puts her at risk? Nadia looked toward the hallway where Ivy slept, then back at Elliot. We don't have the luxury of pretending this isn't happening, Nadia said quietly. That boy knows things. He's not just a stranger with a story. Elliot's throat tightened again. He thought of the way Caleb had shielded Ivy instinctively in the lobby. He thought of the boy's words, not again. Elliot's voice turned low. We do this carefully. Nadia nodded. They agreed on strict boundaries. They would see Caleb again, public place, security nearby. No contact with Ivy until they understood who he was and why he knew what he knew. Elliot's stomach churned as if he was walking toward an edge. The next morning, Elliot left the penthouse before dawn. He went to the hospital lobby alone, wearing a coat and a cap like he could hide from fate. He stood near the pillar where Caleb had stood. Minutes passed, then an hour. Elliot's mind raced with every possibility. Maybe Caleb wouldn't show. Maybe the letter was a trap. Maybe this was someone's cruel joke. Then, just as Elliot's patience frayed, he saw movement near the side entrance. Caleb stepped in, barefoot again, carrying a small backpack that looked too light to hold a life. He spotted Elliot immediately, as if he had known exactly where Elliot would stand. He approached slowly. Elliot's heart pounded like it wanted to escape. Up close, Caleb looked younger than Elliot had thought. Maybe 13, maybe 14. His face had that hard edge poverty gives children, the way it forces them to grow their eyes older than their years. But there was something else too. Something in the shape of his jaw. Something in the way his brows pulled together when he was thinking. It hit Elliot like a punch. Caleb looked like him. Not an exact copy, but enough that it made Elliot's skin go cold. Caleb stopped a few feet away, posture cautious, ready to run if needed. You came, Caleb said. Elliot's voice was rough. You left a letter. Caleb nodded. My mom wrote it, before she was gone. Elliot's mouth went dry. Your mom is Miriam. Caleb's eyes flickered. Then he nodded again. Yes. Elliot's stomach twisted. Where is she? Elliot asked, though he already feared the answer. Caleb's gaze dropped. She died last year. Elliot felt the world tilt. He hadn't known. He hadn't been allowed to know. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay standing. I need proof, Elliot said, voice tight. You understand that? Caleb lifted his chin. I expected that. He reached into his backpack and pulled out something else, a small plastic pouch, like the kind hospitals used. Inside was a hospital bracelet. Elliot's eyes locked onto it. He recognized the logo, Hartwell's First Clinic, long before it became a brand. He recognized the date stamped faintly on the plastic, and he recognized the name printed in faded ink. Caleb Hart. Elliot's breath caught. That could be forged, he managed. Caleb's lips pressed together, not offended, just tired. I know, he said, so I brought more. He pulled out a folded photograph. Elliot hesitated, then took it with trembling fingers. The photo showed Miriam in a hospital bed, pale but smiling, holding a newborn wrapped in a blanket. And beside her, in the corner of the frame, was Elliot himself, younger, shocked, tears in his eyes. Elliot stared at his own face as if he didn't recognize the man, because that man had hope. That man believed the world was honest enough to mourn properly. Elliot's throat tightened. Caleb watched him carefully. You remember, Caleb said softly. Elliot's voice broke. I thought you were gone. Caleb's jaw tightened. So did my mom, he said, until she found out you didn't sign off on it. She found out you weren't told the truth. Elliot's eyes snapped up. Who told her that? Caleb hesitated. Then he said, a nurse, one who felt guilty. She gave my mom copies of records. She said people in suits came and made everyone sign papers. Elliot's hand shook harder. Grant. Always Grant. Elliot forced himself to focus. Why are you here now? Caleb's gaze flicked toward the rehab wing upstairs. Because of her, he said. Elliot's stomach clenched. Ivy. Caleb nodded. How do you know her name? Elliot demanded. Caleb flinched slightly. Then he said, I watched. I listened. People talk when they think you're invisible. Elliot's voice was sharp. That's not enough. You knew about her ankle. You knew details. Caleb looked away, jaw tense. Finally, he said, because I've been inside the rehab wing. Elliot's blood ran cold. You've been near my daughter? He hissed. Caleb snapped his gaze back, eyes blazing. I never touched her. I never hurt her. I just watched. Because someone was hurting her. Elliot froze. What did you just say? He whispered. Caleb swallowed. You think therapy is always help? He said, voice lower now. But sometimes it's business. Elliot stared. Caleb continued, choosing words carefully. I saw a man, Caleb said. Not a therapist. Not a doctor. He came late, when everyone else was gone. He told a nurse to bring your daughter to the back room. He said it was special equipment. Elliot's chest tightened with fear. Caleb's eyes hardened. Your daughter cried, he said. Not because it hurt like muscles hurt, because she was scared. Elliot's fists clenched. Why didn't you tell someone? Elliot asked, voice strained. Caleb's laugh was bitter and short. Tell who? The people who work there? The people who wear badges and walk past kids like they don't exist? I tried once. They chased me out. Elliot's mind raced. Was it possible? Had someone been using Ivy's vulnerability as leverage? Had someone been keeping her from improving? The thought made Elliot feel sick. Caleb's voice softened slightly. I'm not here to destroy you, he said. I'm here because I don't want her to be stuck like I was stuck. Elliot stared at him. You were stuck? Elliot asked. Caleb's gaze dropped again. In a system, Caleb said quietly. In lies. In people who decide your life is a problem to manage. Elliot's throat tightened. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to pull this boy close and say, I'm sorry. I'm here now. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not without knowing the full truth. Elliot's voice turned controlled. If what you're saying is real, you understand this puts you in danger. Caleb's lips twitched in something like a sad smile. I've been in danger, he said, most of my life. Elliot felt the weight of that line settle into his bones. He forced himself to breathe. 2 days, Caleb had said. Elliot nodded slowly. Fine, Elliot said. You get one chance to show me what you mean. But you do it my way. With doctors present. With security. With proof. Caleb nodded once. Okay. Elliot swallowed hard. And Caleb, Elliot added, voice quieter. If you are who you say you are? Caleb's eyes lifted. Elliot's voice cracked. Then I failed you. Caleb's face didn't soften the way Elliot hoped. It stayed guarded, but his eyes flickered, just for a second, with something that looked like relief. I didn't come for an apology, Caleb said. I came for her. Elliot swallowed the ache in his throat. Then we start today, he said. Elliot arranged a private session in the rehab wing that afternoon. Not the back room Caleb had mentioned. A glass-walled therapy suite with cameras and staff present. Elliot insisted on being there. Nadia insisted on being there too. When Ivy rolled in, she saw Caleb standing near the wall. Her eyes widened. You came back, she said. Caleb's expression softened. I said I would. Ivy glanced at her parents, confused. Elliot cleared his throat. Ivy, he said carefully. This is someone who wants to help. Nadia's eyes were fixed on Caleb, like she was trying to see through time. Caleb met her gaze, then lowered his eyes respectfully. Ma'am, he said. Nadia's voice trembled slightly. Hello. Ivy looked between them, sensing something bigger than words. Elliot stepped closer to Ivy's chair. This is a test, Elliot told Caleb, voice firm. No touching without permission. No secrets. If anything feels wrong, it ends. Caleb nodded. Understood. A therapist stood ready, skeptical but curious. Caleb didn't ask to take over. He didn't demand anything. He simply observed Ivy for a moment. How she held her shoulders. How her hands gripped the armrests. How her breathing changed when she looked at the parallel bars. Then he spoke, calm and clear. Can we start with your hands? Caleb asked Ivy. Ivy blinked. My hands. Caleb nodded. Your hands are brave. They do what you ask. Your legs, they're scared. So we borrow bravery from your hands. The therapist frowned, confused. But Ivy looked intrigued. Caleb stepped to the side, keeping distance. Close your eyes, he said. Imagine your feet. Not your legs. Just your feet. Wiggle your toes in your mind. Ivy frowned, concentrating. Nadia watched, holding her breath. Elliot's heart pounded. Nothing happened at first. Then Ivy's brow furrowed. I can't feel them, she whispered. Caleb nodded like that was okay. Okay, he said. Then imagine your favorite shoes. The ones with the bright laces. Ivy's lips twitched. My rainbow sneakers. Caleb smiled slightly. Yes. Imagine them on your feet. Imagine the laces. The way they press your toes. Ivy's breathing steadied. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Caleb continued, voice even. Now, he said. Press your hands against the armrests. Hard. Like you're pushing the chair away. Ivy did it. Good, Caleb said. Now, without moving anything else, tell your brain to push your heels down. Just a little. The therapist leaned forward, watching Ivy's feet. Elliot leaned too, barely breathing. For a moment, nothing. Then, so small it almost looked like a trick of the light, Ivy's left foot twitched. Nadia gasped. Elliot's mouth fell open. The therapist blinked rapidly and leaned closer. Ivy's eyes flew open. Did you see that? She cried. Did you see that? Nadia grabbed her hand. I saw it. Elliot felt a surge of hope so sharp it hurt. Caleb didn't celebrate. He didn't grin like a magician. He simply nodded, calm. That's it, he said softly. That's your foot saying, I'm still here. Ivy's eyes filled with tears. Elliot's throat tightened, and he hated how quickly he wanted to believe. But Elliot's mind was already shifting. Because if Caleb could do this with words, if he could wake something in Ivy that months of expensive therapy hadn't, then Caleb wasn't just a random boy. He was either the luckiest guesser in the world, or he understood something the system around Elliot had ignored. Or worse, someone had been holding Ivy back. The first escalation happened that same day. It seemed small, almost harmless, but it lodged in Elliot's mind like a splinter. After the session, Ivy wanted to show Caleb her puzzle book. She flipped it open, excited. A page fell out, an old family photo that Ivy kept tucked inside because it made her feel safe. It was a picture from years ago, before the accident. Elliot and Nadia stood on a beach, smiling, Ivy between them, laughing. Caleb saw the photo for half a second, and his face changed. Not jealousy, not sadness, recognition. His breath caught. He looked at Elliot, then quickly looked away like he had made a mistake. Elliot's skin went cold. Caleb had never seen that photo before. Yet his reaction looked like memory, not surprise. Elliot's voice came out low. "What is it?" Caleb swallowed. "Nothing." Elliot stared. "Caleb." Caleb's jaw tightened. Finally, he whispered, "You used to sing that song to her." Elliot froze. "What song?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked at Ivy, then at Nadia, then at Elliot. And then he said quietly, "The one about the paper boat. The one you hum when you think no one hears." Elliot's heart slammed, because Elliot did hum that song. Not in public, not where anyone could hear. He hummed it in Ivy's room when she slept, because he had hummed it to himself for years. It had been Miriam's song, a lullaby she used to sing in the clinic break room when she thought no one was listening. Elliot's voice turned rough. "Who told you that?" Caleb's eyes flickered with pain. "My mom," he whispered. Elliot's breath came out shaky. The small signal was now a flare. Caleb wasn't guessing. He was carrying pieces of Elliot's past. The second escalation came the next day, and it was a test of values. Elliot arranged for Caleb to be brought to the penthouse under strict security. Not as a guest, as a controlled variable. Nadia didn't like it, but she understood Elliot's need for certainty. Caleb arrived wearing borrowed clothes, simple, clean, but still too big, like he wasn't used to fabric that wasn't worn thin. He stood in the entrance hall of the penthouse, like he expected to be thrown out any second. Ivy watched from her wheelchair, curious, but cautious. Nadia offered Caleb water. Caleb drank slowly, eyes scanning, always aware. Elliot sat across from him in the living room, the city sprawling behind him through the window. A security guard stood near the door. Elliot placed an envelope on the table between them. Cash. More money than Caleb had probably ever held. Elliot's voice was controlled. "Take it," he said, "and leave. If you're just here for money, this solves it. You disappear. You don't come back. And I won't call the police." Nadia's eyes widened. "Elliot." Elliot held up a hand, stopping her. Caleb stared at the envelope. For a moment, Elliot saw something flicker in Caleb's eyes. Need, hunger, the raw reality of survival. Then Caleb pushed the envelope back across the table. "I don't want it," he said. Elliot's jaw tightened. "Everyone wants money." Caleb's voice stayed calm. "Money doesn't fix what I came to fix." Elliot leaned forward. "And what did you come to fix, Caleb?" Caleb's gaze flicked to Ivy, then back to Elliot. "You," he said quietly. "And her." Elliot's throat tightened. "You think I need fixing?" Elliot asked, a hint of sarcasm trying to protect him. Caleb didn't flinch. "I think you're drowning," Caleb said, voice steady. "And you keep buying bigger boats instead of learning how to swim." Nadia inhaled sharply. Ivy stared, fascinated. Elliot felt anger rise, hot and defensive. But under the anger was something else. Shame. Because Caleb wasn't wrong. Elliot swallowed. "If you're not here for money," Elliot said, "what are you here for?" Caleb's fingers curled slightly on his knees. He hesitated. Then he said, "Because my mom died thinking she failed. She begged me to find you. She said you weren't a monster. She said you didn't know. She said you would protect me if you knew." Elliot's chest tightened. Caleb continued, voice quieter now. "And because I saw your daughter's face and I recognized it." Elliot froze. Recognized it how? Caleb's eyes flicked to Nadia. He swallowed. "It looks like my mom when she was scared," he whispered. Nadia's eyes filled with tears. Elliot's mind spun. The temptation, the bribe, the easy exit. Caleb had refused it. That meant Caleb's motivation wasn't greed. It was something deeper. And deeper was always more dangerous, because deeper meant truth. The third escalation, the crisis, came that same evening. It started small. A phone call. Nadia's sister calling to check in, voice tight. Then another call from a hospital. Then Elliot's head of security stepping into the living room, face pale. "Sir," he said, "we have a situation." Elliot stood instantly. What? He snapped. The guard hesitated. It's the rehab wing. There's been an incident. Nadia's heart seemed to stop. Elliot's voice turned ice cold. What kind of incident? The guard swallowed. A staff member reported that someone unauthorized was seen near the private equipment room. They're saying the boy, Caleb, was involved. Caleb's head snapped up. What? Nadia whispered. Elliot's blood turned cold. Grant Vale's warning echoed. Stories don't always care about truth. Elliot turned to Caleb. Were you there? Caleb's eyes widened. No, I haven't left this room. Elliot looked at the security guard, who reported it. The guard glanced down at his tablet. Dr. Ward. Elliot's jaw clenched. Dr. Celine Ward ran the rehab program. Highly respected, highly paid, and oddly close with Grant Vale at charity events. Nadia grabbed Elliot's arm. We have to go. Elliot nodded. They rushed to the hospital. Ivy came too, because Ivy refused to be left behind. Caleb insisted on coming, and Elliot, against every instinct, allowed it because keeping Caleb away might make him look guilty. When they arrived, the rehab wing buzzed with tension. Staff whispered. Security guards stood rigid. Dr. Ward waited near the glass wall, expression stern. Grant Vale was there too. Elliot's stomach dropped. Grant shouldn't have been there. Not unless someone had called him. Grant stepped forward, voice calm, almost sympathetic. Elliot, he said, I'm so sorry. I came as soon as I heard. Elliot's eyes narrowed. Who told you? Grant spread his hands. People talk. Elliot felt Nadia stiffen beside him. Dr. Ward pointed at Caleb immediately. That boy, she said, voice sharp, has been wandering the wing for days. We warned security. Today, equipment was tampered with. A patient could have been harmed. Caleb's eyes flashed. I didn't touch your equipment. Dr. Ward's smile was thin. Of course you would say that. Elliot stepped forward, voice dangerous. Show me proof. Dr. Ward lifted her chin. There are cameras. Elliot's eyes locked on her. Then show me. Dr. Ward hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It was small, but Elliot saw it. Grant stepped in smoothly. Let's not escalate this. Elliot, you're under enough stress. The simplest solution is to remove the boy from the premises and let hospital security handle the investigation. Nadia's voice snapped. He's a child. Grant's smile stayed warm, and children can still cause harm. Caleb's fists clenched. Elliot's mind raced. If Grant was pushing to remove Caleb quickly, it wasn't just about equipment. It was about silence. Open loop number 3 tightened. Why was the antagonist threatened by the outsider? Elliot's voice turned controlled. We're reviewing the footage. Now, Dr. Ward's eyes narrowed. You don't have authority over hospital security. Elliot leaned in slightly, voice low. I built this wing. I fund it. I can shut it down with one phone call. Show me the footage. Dr. Ward's jaw tightened. She gestured sharply toward an office. They moved into the small security room. Monitors glowed on the wall. A technician clicked through footage. Elliot stood behind him, Nadia at his side, Grant hovering like a shadow. The technician pulled up the timestamp Dr. Ward referenced. The screen showed the equipment room hallway. A figure darted past. Small. Hood up. The figure paused near the door, hands moving quickly. Then the figure disappeared inside. Dr. Ward pointed triumphantly. There. Elliot stared. At first glance, the figure could have been Caleb. Same height, same build. Grant's voice was soft. Elliot. Elliot raised a hand, silencing him. He leaned closer to the screen. Zoom in, Elliot ordered. The technician zoomed. The hood obscured the face. But as the figure turned slightly, something caught the light. A flash of metal. A watch. Elliot's eyes narrowed. Caleb didn't own a watch, and the watch wasn't cheap. It was sleek, reflective, the kind of thing someone wore when they wanted to look important. Elliot turned slowly, gaze locking on Grant Vale's wrist. Grant's hand was half hidden by his suit sleeve, but Elliot saw the glint. The same watch. Grant's smile faltered for the first time. Elliot's voice went dangerously quiet. Roll it back. The technician did. The figure's hand appeared again. The watch glinted again. Grant swallowed. Nadia's eyes widened. Caleb stared, confusion turning to anger. Elliot turned to Dr. Ward. That's not him. Dr. Ward's face tightened. It could still be. Elliot cut her off. It isn't. Grant stepped forward, voice suddenly firm. Elliot, you're emotional. You're seeing patterns that aren't there. Elliot's gaze stayed on Grant. Am I? Elliot asked softly. Grant's eyes hardened. The technician cleared his throat nervously. There's another camera angle. Dr. Ward snapped. No need. Elliot barked, show it. The technician clicked. A second camera angle showed the hallway from the opposite side. This time, as the figure turned, the hood slipped slightly. Not enough to show a full face, but enough to show a jawline, older than Caleb's, and a hand that looked like an adult's. Elliot's chest tightened. Grant's voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. Elliot turned fully now, facing Grant. You came here fast, Elliot said. Too fast. Grant's jaw clenched. Elliot continued, voice cold. And you're pushing hard to get him removed without a real investigation. Grant's eyes narrowed. Because he's a risk. Elliot leaned in slightly, voice low enough that only Grant could hear. Or because he's a threat, Elliot murmured. Grant's face went still. Just for a second, Elliot saw the real Grant beneath the polish. Calculation. Fear. Then Grant's smile returned, sharp as a knife. You're not thinking clearly, Grant said loudly now for the room. You're projecting. You want a miracle for your daughter, so you're clinging to a homeless boy like he's salvation. It's embarrassing, Elliot. Elliot felt rage surge, but Nadia's hand tightened on his arm, grounding him. Elliot inhaled slowly. No, he said, voice steady now. What's embarrassing is using my child's condition as a chess piece. Dr. Ward's eyes flashed. Grant's smile vanished. The crisis had revealed something crucial. Caleb wasn't the danger. The danger was the people smiling while they moved pieces in the dark. That night, Elliot made a decision he never thought he'd make. He brought Caleb into the inner circle. Not because he trusted him completely, but because Caleb had become a line. And Elliot realized that line had been crossed a long time ago. Elliot confronted Caleb privately in the penthouse library after Ivy fell asleep. The room smelled like leather and old paper. Caleb stood near the shelves, hands in his pockets, posture stiff. Elliot shut the door softly. Nadia stayed outside, giving them space but ready to intervene. Elliot sat in a chair, exhaustion heavy. Caleb stayed standing, like sitting would make him vulnerable. Elliot held the photograph again, the one with Miriam and the newborn. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at Caleb. How much do you know? Elliot asked quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. Enough. Elliot's voice cracked. Do you know what they told me? Caleb's eyes flickered. They told you I died. Elliot nodded, swallowing hard. Caleb's voice turned bitter. They told my mom you didn't care. Elliot's breath caught. No. Elliot whispered fiercely. I cared. His voice broke. He lowered his head, fists clenched. Caleb watched him, expression unreadable. Elliot forced himself to speak again, voice rough. How did you end up on the streets? Elliot asked. Caleb hesitated. Then he said, after my mom died, the people she owed money to came. I ran. I thought if I stayed, they'd take the letter. They'd take everything. Elliot's chest tightened with guilt. Caleb continued, voice quiet but steady. I tried to go to the clinic, Caleb said. I tried to ask for help. They looked at me like I was trash, like I didn't belong in the building that has your name. Elliot winced. Caleb's gaze sharpened. And then I saw your daughter in the lobby. I saw her eyes. I saw you behind her, trying to pretend you weren't afraid. Elliot's throat tightened. Caleb's voice softened slightly. And I realized you weren't the monster. Elliot's eyes lifted. How? Elliot asked, barely breathing. Caleb hesitated, then reached into his backpack again. He pulled out something small. A worn cassette tape. Elliot stared, confused. Caleb held it carefully, like it was fragile. My mom recorded things, Caleb said. Messages. For me. She didn't have much, but she had her voice. Elliot's hands shook as he reached out. Caleb held the tape back for a second. "Before you listen," Caleb said, voice tight, "you have to promise something." Elliot swallowed. "Anything." Caleb's eyes locked on him. "Promise you won't let them erase me again." Elliot's throat burned. "I promise," he whispered. Caleb placed the tape in Elliot's hand. Elliot stared at it like it weighed more than gold. Caleb's voice dropped. "She called you Lee," he said quietly. Elliot froze. No one called him that anymore. Only Miriam had. Elliot's breath caught. Caleb looked away, like admitting that hurt. "That's how I know," Caleb whispered. "Because she never stopped loving you. She just stopped trusting the world around you." Elliot's eyes burned. The truth wasn't coming in one big dump. It was coming in shards, each one cutting deeper. Elliot swallowed hard. "Why did you say you could make Ivy walk again?" Elliot asked, voice strained. "How would you know?" Caleb hesitated. Then he lifted his shirt slightly, revealing a thin scar along his side. Elliot's eyes widened. "I was hit by a car when I was 9, Caleb said quietly. "I couldn't run for months. My hip was messed up. The shelters didn't care, but my mom did." Elliot's chest tightened. Caleb continued. "She learned exercises. She learned tricks. She learned how to talk to my brain like it was a scared animal." Elliot stared. Caleb's voice turned firm. "I'm not a doctor, but I know this. Bodies don't just break. They remember. They freeze. And sometimes someone has to teach them they're safe again." Elliot felt something shift inside him. And this is where everything shifted, because now it wasn't just about Ivy's recovery. It was about the truth they had buried for years. The reveal had started, but the fight was just beginning. Because once Grant Vale realized Elliot was no longer distracted, he didn't just watch. He struck. The next morning, headlines hit Elliot like a slap. "Billionaire's daughter targeted by homeless boy scam," one read. Another said, "Hospital security investigates unauthorized access in child rehab wing." The articles didn't name Caleb at first, but they painted the picture. A desperate family, a suspicious outsider, a potential danger. Elliot saw the narrative forming like a noose. Grant Vale called Elliot early, voice calm. "I tried to stop this," Grant said, "but someone leaked it." Elliot's voice was cold. "Did they?" Grant sighed like he was disappointed. "Elliot, you're spiraling. Bring the boy to the authorities. Clear your name. Focus on your daughter." Elliot's jaw clenched. "My name isn't a priority." Grant's voice sharpened. "It should be. Because without your name, you don't have the power to protect anyone." Then Grant's tone softened again, like he was adjusting a mask. "I'm trying to help," he said. Elliot hung up. Nadia found Elliot staring at his phone, knuckles white. "They're coming," Elliot whispered. Nadia's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Elliot looked up. "Grant's people. Lawyers. Security. Maybe even police." Nadia's face tightened. Caleb stood in the doorway, having overheard enough. "They're going to try to take me," Caleb said quietly. Elliot's chest tightened. Nadia stepped closer to Caleb, voice firm. "Not if we don't let them." Elliot's mind raced. He needed a protective protocol. Something simple. Something emotional. Something that meant safety. He looked at Ivy's bedroom door. Then he looked at Nadia. And he remembered the one word Ivy always used when she wanted out of pain. Not stop. Not no. Something softer that meant, "Please take me somewhere safe." Ivy called it their quiet place word. Bluebird. Ivy had whispered once during a rough therapy session because she wanted to imagine flying away. Elliot swallowed. "We use Bluebird," Elliot said. Nadia blinked, then nodded, understanding instantly. Elliot turned to Caleb. "If anything feels wrong, if anyone tries to separate you from us, you say Bluebird. No matter who's listening, that word means we move. We lock down. We don't argue. We don't hesitate." Caleb nodded slowly. "Bluebird," he repeated quietly, like he was testing how it felt. Nadia touched Caleb's shoulder gently. "And if you can't say it, squeeze my hand twice." Caleb swallowed, eyes flickering with emotion. "Okay," he whispered. The protocol felt like a fragile shield. But Elliot knew shields only worked if you expected arrows. That afternoon, the arrows arrived. 2 police officers came to the penthouse, accompanied by a man in a suit Elliot recognized, one of Grant Vale's legal consultants. The consultant smiled politely, like this was a business meeting. "Mr. Hart," he said, "we received reports of a minor in your residence without legal guardianship. We need to ensure the child is safe and that no laws are being broken." Elliot's jaw clenched. Caleb stood near the hallway, posture stiff. Nadia sat beside Ivy, hand on her shoulder. Elliot forced his voice to be calm. "He is safe." The consultant's smile stayed polite. "That's not your decision to make." One officer looked at Caleb with a softer expression. "Kid, do you know these people?" Caleb's eyes flicked to Ivy, then to Nadia, then to Elliot. Elliot held his breath. This was the moment. Caleb's voice came out steady. "Yes." The consultant's smile thinned. "And are you here willingly?" Caleb hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he said, clear and loud, "Bluebird." Everything snapped into motion. Elliot's security team stepped forward instantly, blocking the hallway to Ivy's room. Nadia rose, wheeling Ivy toward the inner safe room Elliot had installed after the accident. Elliot stepped closer to the officers, voice controlled. "This is a private residence. You can't remove a minor without cause. If you intend to, you'll need a court order." The consultant's eyes narrowed. "We can get one." Elliot's voice sharpened. "Then get one." The officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Hart, we're just doing our job." Elliot's gaze stayed cold. "Then do it properly." Caleb's hands clenched, but he didn't move. The consultant turned toward Caleb again, voice smooth. "Caleb, right? Do you want to go somewhere safe? We can help you." Caleb's eyes flashed. "I am safe." The consultant's smile faded. "You're confused." Nadia's voice snapped from behind. "He's not confused. He's scared of you." The consultant's eyes flicked to Nadia, irritation flashing. The officers exchanged a look. One of them stepped back slightly uneasy, because something felt wrong. This wasn't a normal welfare check. It felt like pressure, like someone was trying to force a quick outcome. The officers left after tense minutes, warning they would follow up. The consultant left with them, but not before leaning close to Elliot and whispering, "You're making a big mistake." Elliot watched them go, heart pounding. Nadia returned, face pale. Ivy clutched her blanket, eyes wide. Caleb stood still, breathing hard. Elliot realized Grant had tried to exploit their safe word protocol by forcing panic, but hadn't worked. They had moved like a unit. Now Elliot needed something stronger than a protocol. He needed proof. Not just proof for himself. Proof that would crush Grant's narrative. Proof that would confirm the twist beyond doubt. The proof mission began that night. Elliot made calls he hadn't made in years. Old contacts. Retired nurses. Former clinic staff. People who had left Hartwell's early days before Grant Vale rose like a shadow behind the company. Most didn't answer. Some hung up. But one name from Miriam's letter kept returning to Elliot's mind. A nurse who felt guilty. Caleb had mentioned her. Elliot dug through old clinic records. It was hard, because Grant had controlled so much paperwork. But Elliot was the founder. He knew how to find hidden directories. He found a name, Nurse Elena Pierce. He found an old address. The next morning, Elliot, Nadia, and Caleb drove to a small town 2 hours away. They didn't tell anyone at the company. They didn't tell the hospital. They moved quietly. Elliot wore a plain jacket. Nadia wore a cap. Caleb sat in the back seat, staring out the window, tense. When they arrived, the house was small, with a porch that sagged slightly. An older woman opened the door cautiously, eyes narrowed. When she saw Elliot, she stiffened. "Mr. Hart," she whispered, like she couldn't believe he was real. Elliot's voice was gentle but urgent. "Nurse Pierce." Her mouth trembled. "I haven't been called that in a long time." Elliot swallowed. "We need to talk. Please." The woman's eyes flicked to Caleb. Her face drained of color. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh my God." Caleb stood still, looking at her. "You know me." Caleb said quietly. The nurse's eyes filled with tears instantly. She covered her mouth. You're alive. Elliot's chest tightened. He stepped forward, voice shaking. You knew. The nurse's shoulders sagged, years of guilt folding her like paper. I tried, she whispered. I tried to stop it, but they threatened my license. They threatened my family. Elliot's jaw clenched. Who? The nurse looked down, then back up, eyes wet. There was a man, she said. Young then, but sharp. Always smiling. Always holding paperwork. Elliot's stomach dropped. Grant Vale. The nurse nodded slowly. He said it was for the company, she whispered. He said the baby's existence would destroy everything. He said the mother, Miriam, was unstable and would use the child to control you. Caleb's fists clenched. Elliot felt rage rise like a wave. The nurse continued, voice trembling. They told you the baby died, she said. They had a doctor sign. They moved the baby to another unit. They said it was adoption. But it wasn't legal. It was theft. Nadia's hand flew to her chest. Elliot's breath came out shaky. Why didn't you tell me? The nurse sobbed softly. I tried. They blocked me. They said if I went to you, you'd ruin the deal. They said you would choose your personal life over the company, and everyone would suffer. Elliot's voice turned low and dangerous. Everyone did suffer. Caleb stood silent, eyes burning. The nurse looked at Caleb, voice breaking. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Caleb's voice came out hoarse. Do you have proof? The nurse blinked, startled by his directness. Then she nodded slowly. I kept copies, she whispered. I didn't know why at first. Maybe I knew, deep down, that one day you'd need them. She disappeared into the house and returned with a worn folder. Inside were photocopies of hospital records, old emails printed out, and one crucial thing, a discharge form, stamped, signed, and it listed the baby's name, Caleb Hart. It listed Miriam Pierce, her maiden name, on a line that had been crossed out and replaced with another name, a name Elliot didn't recognize, a forged identity. Elliot's hands shook as he held it. Nadia's voice trembled. This is it. The nurse nodded, tears streaming. And there's more. She pulled out small USB drive. I took video, she whispered. Not of the baby, of the man who came for him. I was scared. I wanted insurance. Elliot's heart pounded. Video, he whispered. The nurse nodded. I have my phone in my pocket. The footage is shaky, but you can hear him. You can see his face. Elliot's jaw clenched. Grant. Receipts. A timeline. A witness. Elliot felt something settle inside him. This was no longer suspicion. This was a case. But Elliot knew proof only mattered if it survived the enemy's counterattack. And Grant Vale would counterattack hard. On the drive back, Elliot's phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls from the company. Calls from unknown numbers. A text from Grant. We need to talk. Immediately. Elliot didn't respond. He kept driving. Because now he had a mission beyond survival. He had to protect Caleb. He had to protect Ivy. And he had to expose Grant before Grant erased him again. Grant struck again before Elliot could act. When Elliot returned home that night, the penthouse felt wrong. Too quiet. Security at the door looked tense. Elliot's head of security approached, face pale. Sir, he whispered, your office was accessed while you were gone. Elliot's blood turned cold. How? The guard swallowed. Someone used an executive override code. Elliot's jaw clenched. Only a few people had executive override. Elliot, Grant, and one other board member. Elliot rushed to his office. Drawers were slightly shifted. A laptop was open, screen dark. Elliot's safe, where he kept sensitive documents, was closed, but the dial was turned. Someone had tried. Elliot's stomach dropped. They knew he was gathering proof. He checked a folder from Nurse Pierce. It was still in his bag, but the fear remained. Grant was hunting. That night, Elliot didn't sleep. He sat in the living room, staring out at the city. Nadia sat beside him, silent. Caleb sat on the floor, leaning against the couch, eyes half open like he was guarding. At one point, Ivy rolled in quietly, unable to sleep. She looked at her father's face and knew. "Something's happening," she whispered. Elliot forced a smile. "Just grown-up problems." Ivy's eyes narrowed. "I'm not made of glass," she said again, echoing herself. Elliot's throat tightened. He reached for her hand. "You're right." Ivy looked at Caleb. "Are they trying to take you?" Caleb hesitated, then nodded once. Ivy's face tightened. She reached out and grabbed Caleb's hand. Caleb stiffened, surprised by the contact. Ivy held on anyway. "You protected me," she whispered. "So we protect you." Caleb's eyes flickered with emotion. Elliot watched the two children, and something inside him broke and rebuilt at the same time. This wasn't just about biology. It was about choice. It was about who you protected. The next morning, Elliot set the final proof mission in motion. First, DNA. He didn't want a private kit that could be questioned. He wanted an official test, done by a lab that could testify. He contacted a respected medical lab outside Hartwell's influence and arranged discrete samples. Second, digital evidence. Elliot's IT team was loyal to him, not to Grant, but Elliot knew Grant had planted people everywhere. So Elliot went personally to one person he trusted completely, a woman named Priya Sato, Hartwell's early co-founder, now semi-retired, but still holding enough stock to scare the board. Priya met Elliot in a small cafe, eyes sharp. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. Elliot slid the folder across the table. Priya read quietly. Her face hardened. "This is war," she murmured. Elliot nodded. "I need access to archive company emails, old files, anything Grant touched." Priya's jaw clenched. "You should have come to me sooner." Elliot's voice was quiet. "I didn't know." Priya looked up, eyes fierce. "Now you do." Priya made calls. Within hours, Elliot had access to deep archives. They found old communications referencing PR crisis, legacy risk, and one chilling phrase repeated in internal threads: "Resolve the infant liability." Infant liability. Elliot felt sick reading it. They found an email chain where Grant suggested a clean adoption route and reassured the board it would be untraceable. They found expense reports tied to legal consultants and hush payments. They found a digital trail. Third, a witness. Nurse Pierce agreed, shaking, to sign an affidavit and speak to investigators if protected. Elliot arranged legal protection for her immediately, because Elliot knew what Grant did to people who threatened him. By evening, Elliot had enough proof to not just accuse Grant. He had enough to destroy him. But destroying Grant wasn't enough. Elliot needed to do it in a way that protected Ivy and Caleb from becoming headlines. Grant wanted a public mess. Elliot needed a controlled collision. So Elliot chose the place Grant couldn't avoid. A board meeting scheduled for the next morning. A meeting Grant had planned to use as leverage, one where the board would formally propose temporary leadership restructuring due to Elliot's personal distractions. Grant thought Elliot would come in tired and compliant. Grant thought Elliot would surrender. Elliot walked into that boardroom the next morning like a man carrying thunder. Nadia came too, not as decoration, but as witness. Caleb came, escorted by security, hood down, face visible. Ivy came too because Ivy insisted. She rolled in wearing her rainbow sneakers on her feet, even though she couldn't use them yet, as if daring the future to argue. Board members stared. Whispers erupted. Grant Vale stood at the far end of the room, smile perfectly placed. "Elliot," he said warmly, "I was worried you wouldn't make it." Elliot didn't answer the greeting. He nodded to Priya, who sat near the center, calm and ready. Elliot took his seat. The chair felt like a battlefield. Grant began with polished slides about risk management and public image. He spoke smoothly about protecting the company. He spoke like a man who believed his words were law. Then he turned toward Elliot, expression sympathetic. "Elliot," Grant said, "we need to address the situation. The press is circling. There are accusations of unauthorized minors in your home. There are security concerns involving your daughter. For the good of the company, we need you to step back temporarily." Elliot stared at him, face unreadable. Grant continued, voice soft. "This doesn't have to be ugly. We can make this smooth." Elliot's voice came out calm, deadly. No. Grant blinked. Excuse me. Elliot slid a folder across the table. Not just one. Several. He looked at the board members, one by one. I'm not stepping back, Elliot said, because what's ugly isn't my personal life. Grant's smile tightened. Elliot continued, voice steady. What's ugly is that my CFO has been manipulating this company and my family for years. Grant chuckled lightly, trying to make Elliot sound irrational. Elliot, you're under stress. Elliot cut him off. Grant Vale stole my child. The room went silent. It was the kind of silence that made people hold their breath without realizing it. Grant's face went still. One board member sputtered. What? Elliot gestured toward Caleb. This is Caleb Hart, Elliot said. My son. The son I was told died. The son who was taken. The son who has been living on the streets while you sat in this room pretending to be a guardian of stability. Grant's voice came out sharp. This is insane. Priya spoke calmly. It's not insane. It's documented. She slid a screen forward. On it, the archived emails appeared. Expense reports. Language like infant liability. Board members leaned in, eyes widening. Grant's face flushed. Elliot's voice stayed calm, but his eyes burned. I have hospital records, Elliot said. Affidavits. Digital trails. And we're waiting on DNA results from a certified lab. Grant laughed, too loud, too forced. You can't be serious. This is some emotional stunt. Elliot leaned forward slightly. Let's talk about stunts, Elliot said quietly. He nodded to Priya again. She clicked play on the screen. A shaky video appeared. A hallway. A pocket camera angle. And then Grant Vale's face, younger but unmistakable, leaned toward someone off-screen. His voice, recorded, said, He's better off out of the picture. Sign it, and you keep your job. The room froze. Grant's lips parted. His eyes darted around like he was looking for escape. Board members stared, horrified. Elliot felt a strange calm wash over him. This was the proof. This was the moment the twist became undeniable. But Grant wasn't done. He slammed his hands on the table, eyes wild. You think you can just throw me under the bus? He snarled, mask finally gone. You're nothing without me. You build dreams, Elliot. I build control. And control is what kept this company alive. Elliot's voice remained steady. Control is what destroyed my family. Grant's eyes flicked toward Ivy, and in that glance, Elliot saw something dangerous. Grant hissed, Your daughter's condition, your precious little tragedy, was the only reason you stayed predictable. It made you weak. It made you manageable. Nadia gasped. Elliot's blood turned cold. You admit it, Elliot whispered. Grant smiled cruelly. Admit what? That a girl didn't get better? That therapy takes time? Prove anything. Elliot's voice went icy. Caleb saw someone take Ivy into a back room. Someone tampered with equipment. Someone tried to frame him. Grant's smile wavered. Elliot continued, voice sharp. And we have footage of a watch in the hallway. The same watch on your wrist. Grant's eyes flashed. He turned suddenly toward the door, as if he might bolt. But two security officers, loyal to Elliot, stepped in, blocking. Priya stood calm. Grant Vale, you are being removed from this board meeting, and law enforcement has already been contacted. Grant's face twisted. He pointed at Elliot, voice venomous. You think you win? You think the world will celebrate you? They'll tear you apart. They'll call you reckless, unstable. They'll call your son a con artist. They'll call your daughter a headline. Elliot's voice stayed steady. Let them try. Grant's eyes darted again. Then he did the one thing Elliot didn't expect. He lunged toward Ivy. Not to hurt her physically. To grab her wheelchair. To yank her as leverage. It happened fast. Nadia screamed. Elliot's body moved instinctively. But Caleb moved faster. Caleb threw himself between Grant and Ivy. Hands out, blocking. Don't, Caleb said, voice low. Grant grabbed Caleb's shoulder hard, trying to shove him aside. Caleb staggered, but he held his ground. You don't touch her, Caleb repeated, voice shaking now with rage. Not again. Grant's eyes narrowed. Get out of my way, street rat. Caleb's eyes burned. I'm not invisible anymore. Elliot's security team surged forward. They grabbed Grant, pulling him back. Grant fought, shouting, spitting words like poison. But it was over, because there were too many witnesses now. Too many eyes. Too much proof. Grant Vale was escorted out, still yelling threats about lawsuits and reputations. Elliot stood over Ivy, breathing hard. Nadia knelt beside Ivy, shaking but holding her. Caleb stood in front of Ivy still, shoulders heaving, like his body was the last wall. Elliot stared at Caleb. The boy's hands trembled, but he didn't run. Elliot's throat tightened. The final collision had happened, and the outsider had protected what Elliot loved most. Again, now came justice and confirmation. The DNA results arrived that evening. Elliot sat at the kitchen island, hands clenched. Nadia stood beside him, fingers intertwined tightly. Caleb sat across from them, posture stiff, eyes wary. Ivy sat nearby, watching all of them like she was reading a story and trying to guess the ending. Elliot's phone buzzed. The lab. Elliot answered with a voice that barely worked. The lab representative spoke calmly, professionally. Elliot listened. His face drained, then flushed, then went still. When he hung up, he stared at the phone as if it had changed the laws of the world. Nadia whispered, "Elliot?" Elliot's voice broke. "He's mine." Caleb's breath caught. Nadia covered her mouth, tears spilling. Ivy's eyes widened. Caleb stared at Elliot, expression unreadable. Then, very slowly, Caleb's shoulders sagged. Like a weight he had carried his whole life, finally found a place to rest. Elliot stood, walking around the island on shaking legs. He stopped in front of Caleb. Caleb tensed, ready for rejection, ready for disappointment. Elliot lowered himself to one knee, a level. "I'm sorry," Elliot whispered. Caleb's jaw clenched, eyes wet but stubborn. Elliot continued, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you had to survive without me. I'm sorry I let people decide your life." Caleb's lips trembled. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. Elliot swallowed hard. "I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I don't expect you to trust me instantly. But I need you to know this." Elliot's hand lifted slowly, stopping short of touching Caleb, waiting for permission. Caleb hesitated. Then he nodded once. Elliot placed his hand gently on Caleb's shoulder. "I'm here," Elliot whispered, "and I'm not leaving." Caleb's eyes filled, but instead of collapsing into Elliot's arms like a movie moment, he did something more real. He wiped his face roughly with his sleeve and said, voice hoarse, "Okay." One word. Heavy. Earned. Nadia stepped forward, trembling. She looked at Caleb, tears streaming. "I didn't know," she whispered. "If I had." Caleb shook his head slightly, voice quiet. "It's not your fault." Nadia swallowed and reached out slowly. Caleb hesitated again. Then he allowed her to touch his arm, gentle. She whispered, "Welcome home." Caleb blinked hard, fighting tears. Ivy watched them, silent. Then she rolled her chair forward slightly, looking up at Caleb. "So," Ivy said, voice soft, "does this mean you're my brother?" Caleb's face flickered with surprise. He glanced at Elliot, as if unsure what word to use. Elliot's voice was rough, if you want him to be. Ivy nodded slowly, like she was deciding something important. Then she held out her hand again. Caleb looked at it, and this time he took it. The emotional resolution didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet, with breathing, with the feeling of a house rearranging itself around a truth it had never allowed in. Grant Vale was arrested within days, not just for one crime, for a chain of crimes. Illegal adoption trafficking, fraud, coercion, tampering with medical equipment, because Elliot's team found more evidence in the rehab wing once the pressure was off. A nurse came forward, shaking, admitting she had been instructed to delay progress and keep the heart case ongoing. It wasn't just cruelty. It was leverage. It was money. Grant had been feeding off Elliot's pain like a parasite. Dr. Ward lost her license, pending investigation. The hospital issued statements, apologies, promises of reform. The press went wild. Of course they did. They called Elliot reckless. They called him brave. They called him manipulated. They called Caleb everything from a hero to a scandal. But Elliot stopped caring about the words, because inside the penthouse, a different story was unfolding, one that didn't belong to headlines. Caleb stayed, not as a pet project, not as a charity case, as family. He got a room, his own room, with a bed that didn't squeak, with sheets that smelled clean, with a door he could close. The first night, he didn't sleep much. Elliot heard footsteps at 3 a.m. He found Caleb standing in the kitchen, staring at the fridge light like it was unreal. Elliot didn't scold him. He simply opened the fridge, pulled out food, and sat at the table. Caleb hesitated, then sat too. They ate quietly. No big speeches, just presence. Nadia worked with Caleb gently, not pushing, not forcing. She learned his habits. He flinched when doors shut suddenly. He ate fast, like food might disappear. He apologized too much for existing. Ivy, though, treated him like a puzzle she wanted to solve. She asked him questions. What was your favorite place to sleep? What was the best thing you ever ate? What did you do when you were scared? Caleb answered carefully at first, then more openly. And slowly, the air in the home shifted. Not perfect, but different. And Ivy's rehab changed too. Elliot pulled her out of the hospital program immediately. He brought in independent specialists with no ties to Hartwell. He insisted on transparency. He insisted on Ivy's comfort and consent. Caleb worked with Ivy too, not as a replacement for doctors, but as a steady voice that reminded her she wasn't broken. She was rebuilding. They started with small things. Breathing, relaxing shoulders, imagining feet like they were part of her, not enemies. Weeks passed. Then one morning, in the living room, Ivy insisted on trying the parallel bars again. Nadia stood close. Elliot stood ready. Caleb stood a few feet away, calm. Ivy gripped the bars, eyes fierce. I'm scared, she admitted. Caleb nodded. Then we do it scared. Ivy took a breath. She shifted her weight. Her left foot pressed down, more than a twitch now. Her right foot followed, shaky but there. Her legs trembled. Elliot held his breath, so hard his chest hurt. Ivy's face tightened with effort. Nadia's eyes filled. Then, inch by inch, Ivy lifted one foot forward. It wasn't a run. It wasn't even a full step without help. It was slow, assisted, shaky. But it was movement. It was proof. Ivy's eyes widened, tears spilling. I did it, she whispered, voice trembling. I did it. Elliot's knees nearly gave out. Nadia covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Caleb's face softened in a way Elliot hadn't seen before. Caleb smiled, small, real. Yeah, he whispered. You did. Elliot walked forward slowly, careful not to crowd Ivy. He reached out, steadying her elbow gently. Ivy looked up at him, crying. Dad, she said, voice shaking. My legs woke up. Elliot's voice broke. They did. And in that quiet moment, Elliot felt something he hadn't felt since the accident. Not relief. Not victory. Something deeper. Forgiveness. Not from Ivy. From himself. Because the story wasn't ending with perfection. Ivy still had hard days. Days where pain flared. Days where she cried in frustration. Days where she wanted to throw her sneakers across the room. Caleb still had nightmares. Sometimes he woke sweating, heart racing, convinced someone was coming to drag him away. Nadia still had moments where she stared at Caleb and felt grief for the years stolen from him. Elliot still had rage that rose unexpectedly. Thinking of what Gret had done, healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy. It was slow. But it was real. One evening, months later, Elliot sat with Caleb on the balcony. The city lights glittered below. The air was cool. Caleb leaned on the railing, quiet. Elliot didn't force conversation. He simply said softly, Do you ever think about Miriam? Caleb's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. Every day. Elliot swallowed. I wish I could tell her I found you. I wish I could tell her she was right about me. Caleb's voice came out rough. She knew you weren't a monster. She didn't know how to fight people like Grant. Elliot stared into the night. I should have fought harder. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that made Elliot's chest tighten. "You're fighting now," Caleb whispered. "That's something." Elliot nodded, eyes burning. Inside, Ivy laughed softly at something Nadia said. The sound drifted out onto the balcony like warmth. Caleb listened to it, eyes distant. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "It's weird." Elliot glanced at him. "What is?" Caleb swallowed, hearing her laugh and knowing it's not going to disappear. Elliot's throat tightened. He wanted to say something big, something that fixed everything. But he had learned something. Big words didn't fix stolen years. Small actions did. So Elliot just said quietly, "It won't disappear. Not if I can help it." Caleb nodded once. The next day, Ivy asked Caleb to race her down the hallway. Caleb stared at her, confused. "You can't run," Caleb said gently. Ivy grinned mischievously. "Not yet," she said, "but I can roll." Caleb blinked. Ivy pointed at Elliot. "And Dad can run." Elliot groaned. "I already know how this ends." Ivy's eyes sparkled. "Exactly." Caleb laughed. An actual laugh, surprised out of him. Elliot watched that laugh like it was proof too, because it meant life was coming back. Not perfectly, but truly. And if you're listening to this right now, think about how close Elliot Hart came to losing everything without even knowing it. Not just his daughter's steps, not just his son's childhood, but the truth that would have stayed buried if a barefoot boy hadn't stood in a hospital lobby and refused to be invisible. So here's the question. If you were Elliot, if someone you thought was gone suddenly stood in front of you with the truth in their eyes, would you have the courage to face it, even if it shattered everything you thought you knew? And if you want more stories where one moment flips a whole life upside down, you know where to find the next one.